were thinking about moving on from Sustainable Development Goals. They haven't really worked. Tracking them hasn't resulted in better performance. And so we started looking at what happens if you don't just look at one at a time, but you start thinking about what's the relationship between land degradation and food security, for example, and looking in multiple elements. And Mary Crossan, who's here, was leading that, and Alex Awiti was also somewhere here. Took the policy tracking tool forward with the group. And Batanga Ndemo, the ambassador to Brussels, to Belgium, and to the EU from Kenya, wrote up, he was so impressed with this session out of the whole of what he attended during the summit, that he wrote it up in a newspaper article here in Kenya, with the agroecology session as the highlight for him. That linked to a couple of other things that have been quite important events. In Agroecology Europe in Hungary, we had a session, a very interactive session on alternative strategies for fertilizing crops, and particularly substituting for industrial nitrogen. And the presentation that the TPP did on that has been looked at nearly 400 times on YouTube, which is quite a lot for a 30-minute disposition. And also connection on the policy front was at the Wallace conference in Costa Rica in May. The TPP policy paper from 2022 was taken forward in a session on transforming food systems through agroecology. We also had a fantastic event in the Stockholm Water Week, and I realising that I promised Bernard I wouldn't just be overly positive, but also really reflective about these events and how things were going on. What was great, number one, with the Stockholm Water Week event was that it met the criteria for excellence in terms of diversity, in terms of number of women and the ethnic mix and age distribution. What we did during that meeting was present ideas to revise the agroecological principles to try to be more inclusive of water and aquatic foods. And that then became something on the so that people could all put your ideas into the key team, which is led by IMI and World Fish. Following that, we ended up at COP28 with a key session on linking land and water, at which the final version of those principles was then presented, and that will now be the subject of a paper that's due to be published. Here in East Africa, there was the first East African Agroecology Conference, and we had a side event on multi-stakeholder platforms and inclusive policy development. Key moment. And in the fourth Global Conference of the Sustainable Food Programme in Hanoi in Vietnam, we had a side event which looked also at CAPSIG. Saruk Chan presented alongside a lot of other Southeast Asian presentations, and this really was a shaping event. It was extremely well attended, and it led to the Vietnam government picking up on key aspects of what happened during that, and agroecology being enshrined as a key component of food systems transformation in Vietnam. And this Southeast Asian sort of set of countries, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand and Vietnam, are really leading the way in many ways in trying to integrate agroecology into food system transformation. Now, in terms of outputs, I've already mentioned the revision of the agroecological principles. That is an ongoing process. The water and aquatic foods come in. We also, in that Hungary session, had a key suggestion to revise the wording of the input reduction principle to shift from just labeling it as reducing inputs as to favouring the use of natural processes over their substitution by artificial inputs, including expensive and environmentally disruptive chemicals. And that, we think, is quite important.